Welcome to Conversations with Doc Martin. This video series focuses on extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. And today is certainly no exception. We're joined by my good friend, Calen Ouellette. Calen serves to cultivate the Los Angeles LGBT Center's engagement and fundraising efforts, which is the largest center of its kind in the world. Before joining the center's team, Calen served in a variety of leadership roles at the University of Southern California. Most notably, he led the largest global fundraising campaign for the Herman Ostrow School of Dentistry. The record-breaking drives were part of a pioneering $6 billion, that's with a B, campaign for the University of Southern California from 2010 to 2018. If that wasn't enough, outside of his professional obligations, Calen also takes time to volunteer and has taken time to volunteer at a wide variety of organizations, including the Pointe Foundation and the Griffith Observatory. Originally from Montana in the Pacific Northwest, Calen has called Los Angeles home for more than 20 years. So Calen, welcome to you today.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And hello to everyone that's listening.
Absolutely. You know, it's to share with all of our listeners, we've known each other now for 14 years. Can you believe that?
Yeah, 14 years.
Yeah,
I remember the day we met.
That's exact. And in fact, fun fact, I think I've told you this before. You and I were the very first photo I ever shared on Facebook.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know I had that privilege.
Yes. And it was on my BlackBerry.
I feel honored.
Things. Yes. Yes. It was on my BlackBerry. But anyway, so
who has a BlackBerry today?
You know, I still miss the curves keyboard, but that's another topic entirely. So listen, I was so excited to ask you to join us. And I really, again, want to thank you for your time. And you've had a really quite interesting career, and you've also, you know, made yourself available to the community and the communities in the Los Angeles area. And so I guess let's kind of take a step back, if we will. So, you know, you and I met when you were with USC, specifically the Herman Ostrow School of Dentistry. And so tell us a little bit about your kind of trajectory and how you actually got into fundraising. Yeah,
no, that's a great question. It all started when I was just a wee lad. I'm kidding. So it was, it actually does start when I was younger. Mm-hmm. I was really into science and math. Those were the two areas I focused on. And in high school, I had the opportunity and the privilege to go to space camps and astronomy camps. I was very much interested in becoming an astronaut and going that route. And my parents, thank them so much for their investment of time and money, sent me away to all of these different places to learn and grow. And it was my junior year of high school, way back. And I was mapping Mars at 3 a.m. down in Tucson, Arizona, actually.
Okay.
And I realized it was more of a hobby and I didn't want to do it.
Okay.
So I came home and told my parents. They were irritated, to say the least, but ended up doing kind of this whole exploration of what do I want to do with my life and my career. Okay. And took one of those tests at the time to help kind of shape, and it said that I would be good at public relations and communication, which I had no idea what that was. Mm-hmm. And happened to be living in Spokane, Washington, which is a short drive from Washington State University in Pullman, mm-hmm. Washington. Mm-hmm. And so my father and I went down to Pullman and met with the dean of the Edward R. College of Communication, mm-hmm. Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. Mm-hmm. And I really fell in love with the discipline of public relations. So for an undergrad, went into communications and public relations and kind of started to go that route. Mm-hmm. And when I graduated, I had the opportunity to go to New York City and be an intern at Rockefeller Center with NBC Studios. So really got to play around. Yeah, got to play around a lot in that arena. Knew I didn't want to necessarily the entertainment route, but I needed something that really built my resume. And while in New York, from a personal perspective, started to really understand a little bit more about myself. Mm-hmm. Came back after quite some time in New York, or back to the West Coast, landed in Los Angeles and I was in a fraternity in my undergrad in college, mm-hmm. landed in a fraternity brother's hallway closet as I was trying to find, there's so many things I could say about that. So as I was living in a closet for a while before I came out of that closet, yes. I actually was searching for a place to work and live in Los Angeles, and landed at a public relations firm called Porter Novelli, which mm-hmm. was a great start to my career. lots of different hats I would wear, thrown in a lot of different arenas, getting to do a lot of different campaigns. And one of the largest organizations I worked for during that time was Oral-B Laboratories.
Yep.
And traveled conventions throughout the country, did toothbrushing suites, launched toothbrushes. If you don't know this, if your listeners don't know this, it's a highly competitive toothbrush war.
Yes.
And it's very, very interesting from a marketing and communications perspective, and really got to know that arena quite well. It's been about 5 years in that specifically. So when that ended, it's a very long answer to your question, but I'll get there. So when that ended, I got approached by the dean at the University of Southern California's dental school. And I thought, why would I want to go into academia? And I'm a communication person, but he really shared with me that they needed someone to come in and do corporate and foundation relations, which was very much a similar play on public relations that I had been doing, is building a concept, a story, pitching it for buy-in and engagement, and really saw the synergy there that existed. And so I jumped ship and joined the dental school at USC, and that was a great 15-year journey, which I loved very much. Still good people there that I keep in touch with. But that's how I got to dentistry at USC.
Yeah, and that's how we met. And I have to say, one of my first conversations with you, because I was an executive at a dental products company at the time, and I don't think I'll ever forget it, because the tenor of the conversation was relationships are very important to us, and there were certain things that had occurred, and we wanted to invite you up and have a meeting with the dean. And so myself and the president, and actually our chairman actually came up, and we had a meeting. And I remember sitting there and thinking, the level of transparency and the I'll use the word attempt only because that's what it was at the time. The attempt to broker a relationship, which then occurred, it is like something I haven't seen then or since. And so it doesn't surprise me in the least that you were one of the key players in that massive fund drive that starts with a B for billion. And it's one of the reasons why I want to talk to you, not because of the money amount, but I know I would bet that you've learned a lot of things and had a lot of observations over the years about how and or why people give of their time and money, because they're both valuable. And so there's no judgment here about people who give time versus money. And so, if you think about where you are today versus even where you were when you started, what are some of the lessons that you've learned about helping people see the opportunity in giving back to an institution?
It's a great question. I would say two things. You use the word transparency, and thank you for that, for sharing that perspective of you at that table. Transparency is vital, and I think that folds into the bigger conversation of trust. And how do you build trust in any whether it's a personal relationship, a professional relationship? It's so much less about the business transaction, but really emphasizing what are some similarities. And what I tell so many individuals that I have the privilege to work with is fundraising is not about sales. Fundraising is about listening. And if you're listening, because that's a number one skill set when it comes to a development officer in my book, is if you're listening, you'll hear, and listening can be visual, can be hearing, it could be tasting, it could be experiencing. If you're listening correctly, you will know exactly how to put together something that really taps into that person's passion and wants them to, and encourages them to be part of what you're trying to create. That's such a vital part.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you think about the relationships you've built over the years, I know you've built quite a number of them. And so when you think about relationships, and true relationships are mutual, right? And so what do you think are some of the hallmarks of really good mutual relationships?
That's a great question too. I want to start by saying something about who I am as a person, because
Sure.
I think that really feeds into the fundraising aspect. There are, and everything I say is clearly a personal experience. So
Sure.
everyone's going to have opinions of how they feel about fundraising. But I approach fundraising like a public relations transaction, as I do. And that is creating the story, the pitch to get buy-in and engagement. And when I talk about a donor, and you alluded to this, and I think that's really vital, a donor can be an investor, a donor can be an ambassador, or a donor can be a volunteer. So it's your time and your money. There are many different ways to look at
Sure.
how people are spending or their engagement. Also, which I think is really valuable to a successful fundraiser, and something that I hold close, is $1 to someone may be the same as $1 million to someone else.
Yeah.
And making sure that you're honoring that and recognizing that builds that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Deeper. But let's expand it to your point, even beyond just the fundraising of building relationships, is that communication and that connectivity. And I have found that I am an introvert, which may surprise a lot of people, but I get the definition of that truly is I get my energy from being alone and really recharging in a space that's very zen to me. Lots of spa music and candles that recharges me. Extroverts get their energy from other people. So I'm an introvert, but I think I can really be I like to be around people. And it's listening and remembering and connecting. So things about you that were very personal or important to you is really banking those. And like I said, listening and making sure that you're acknowledging those in the future, making those connections, keeping in communication where possible. I know both of us have been very busy over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Just that sense of recognizing and acknowledging someone, I think is a great step in the right direction to building a relationship. I have people that I've built really strong relationships with me that were challenged with me in the beginning. For example, I worked with a lot of dentists, an interesting group of people, as you might know.
We are.
And I had one that was a more seasoned dentist. And when I was put into place as the chief development officer at Dentistry, I was one of the youngest, greenest chief development officers, I'll say, at USC. And that challenged some of the institutional aspects of the university. And I had a more seasoned dentist that really let me have it and told me how he felt and about his alma mater, his passion of dentistry at USC, and how I was not going to use some strong words, but how I was going to fail in that situation. And instead of taking offense to that, I had to actively choose in that moment to lean in and say, look, give me a year to build some trust with you and keep the door open that I can come to you when I have concerns and questions and need some wisdom on how to navigate things. And that, I think, started to build a different dynamic between us, that he recognized he could be a partner in my success instead of have to watch from the sidelines.
Yeah.
And we've grown to be really good friends.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We have opposing viewpoints on everything, but we respect each other really a lot. And I see him as, a form of mentor and friend, and someone that I really like just to bounce ideas off.
That's great. No, I think that's fantastic. And you hit on so many interesting things to me, because as you know, I've had this journey the last 6 years of becoming a coach and really focusing on communication. And your point about listening, you use the word acknowledgement, and then even in sharing the story that you just did about your now friend, the seasoned dentist, it is truly all about, in any relationship, listening to the other side with open ears and making the other people feel heard. And so when I was listening to you, it was kind of like, okay, so what did he do? He basically didn't let his own ego get in the way. He didn't let his own filters get in the way. And he just kind of opened up and said, okay, I hear you. Those weren't the words you necessarily used, but that's what you did. I hear you. And how can we go through this together? So I think that's fantastic. And it doesn't surprise me about you at all. And as you were talking about being extrovert versus introvert, I remember a number of times years ago when we were at some dental meetings, happened to be there at the same time. And we were just like, could we just hang out for a little bit? Because there was just so much noise and people, In fact, I remember that one time we were in the bar at the Sheraton and we were just kind of hanging out. And
Yeah, it was in
that was like,
Chicago, wasn't
yeah,
it?
that was the first,
Yeah.
that was the first time we ever had a meeting together.
Yeah.
But so when we talk about, mutual relationships and hearing people and so forth, I know you're recently with the Los Angeles LGBT Center. We'll certainly get to that. I absolutely want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about your volunteerism, because I think that, so many people utilize their strengths. Some people don't realize what their strengths are, and your strengths in public relations, and listening to people, you've kind of turned that to kind of other areas of your life. And so I know you're really passionate about the Pointe Foundation. You've been a board member. I'm a member, a mentor of the Pointe Foundation as well. And so talk a little bit about what that is and kind of your journey with them.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a very personal topic to me.
Yeah.
I was, many people I identify as gay.
Mm-hmm.
And many people in the LGBT community do not have the support structure that I had with my own personal family.
Mm-hmm.
They were very much about clearing out obstacles, giving me the support I needed, and to this day have been nothing but loving and supportive of my own personal journey. And that extends to my entire family, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. And I was really privileged with that, and I recognize that. So part of my own personal journey was, and I joke with my parents, my mom and dad, who are still with us and together, that they were kind of in the closet with me and kind of pushed me out. And so I didn't really have this big transition moment. It was one day here's me, and the next day here's me too.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is actually a really great thing and where we should get to go. There should be no coming out process. It should just be this is who I am.
Sure.
It's part of what makes up Calen. But I recognized I wasn't connecting with the community.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to listen. I wasn't able to acknowledge some of the challenges and the nuances. And I had a life of privilege that I wanted to figure out how to use and better understand. And so in that time, George Valencia, who is the executive director of the Pointe Foundation, a personal friend of mine, really encouraged me to join the Pointe Foundation board. Mm-hmm. And it was an opportunity for me to learn, listen, and gather information about community members, students, other board members, and their experiences and their journeys that helped me to better reflect on mine and recognize the privilege I had, but also learn what the challenges were in the community and be able to be compassionate and empathetic to those. And I really appreciated that journey with Pointe Foundation in particular, because it used a lot of my professional skill sets I did to support that organization. Sure. But they taught me so much as an individual and the humanistic side of me. And so that was a vital part of that Pointe Foundation journey.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And would you please kind of go into what their mission is and kind of what they do?
Yeah, certainly. Great question. So the Pointe Foundation is the largest LGBTQ scholarship in the nation. Yep. It started with a couple donors that really saw a need to empower youth that didn't have the support of their families to go on to higher education and really make a difference. Sure. And through that process, they developed scholarships to have that financial component. They developed mentorship connections so that each one of the Pointe Foundation scholars has a mentor through their journey. Yep. And then they developed conferences, leadership conferences to really hone in on the history of the LGBTQ movement, aspects of how to be an effective leader, how to take confidence in speaking. So those are the three strong pillars. And it's evolved to not only focus on four-year higher education, but community colleges as well. It's continued to grow. And the initial piece of it which still exists and is, very, very heart-wrenching for children and youth that are disowned by their families and don't have that support because they don't have an adult to sign off on things. So there is a component of that. But what we've seen in Pointe Foundation over the years is the evolution that parents who want to support their children and have that ability, maybe not the resources, but you have some brilliant, brilliant people coming out of these the Pointe Foundation Scholarship Network
Yeah.
that are making a difference in all professional facets and in personal facets. So it's been that hopefully that gives you a scope of the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of curious, when you shared that you get to use your professional skill sets as a board member, and when you think about utilizing those skill sets, and you think about the good you've been able to do as a participating member of the board, what's some of the biggest surprises that you've had for yourself as a board member, whether it be about the community or even about something of yourself as you've had experiences on the board?
That's a good one. I think a lot of us are going through this right now. When it's, in 2021 coming out, we're still in a pandemic, a global pandemic, and the United States in particular really better listening to itself about some of our own issues, with culture and race, and how we're needing to address that more and more. As you alluded to, I grew up in Montana. I lived in Montana for up until I was almost a teenager, and then in Spokane, Washington, and then I was in my undergrad in outside of Spokane. So Pacific Northwest and Montana were really, that's my home base. I think it's great people, wonderful communities, wonderful culture, but not a lot of diversity.
Sure.
And, going to New York opened me up to a lot more. And then being here in Los Angeles for almost 25 years has really showcased, I think there's a global perspective that I should have, that all of us should have.
Yeah.
And I'll also say USC afforded me the opportunities to travel the world. I've been to so many, and I recognize how privileged I am in that. So many different countries, so many different cultures, all the continents, including Antarctica, and penguins are a culture of their own, so that it's this whole thing of, I think, sitting on the board, but also just who I've come today is I know what I represent. And I've really leaned into the privilege that I have and how I can use that privilege to get other voices heard. And I started with Pointe Foundation because of that LGBTQ aspect. Okay. What I think I've really grown from, not only that, but from the center as well, is the diversity that exists within that alone, and how much broader that is, what I'm afforded, and how I can best use that to help others.
Got it.
And a lot of that starts with listening to understand what are those other obstacles, because I don't have them.
Right. Exactly. And so, before we hit record, we were kind of talking about, observations that you might have made over the years, because you think about your activities with USC, you think about your volunteerism with Pointe Foundation, you think about your volunteerism with the Griffith Observatory, and your current work with the LGBT Center. And so there's no question, there's study after study after study that shows individuals that give of their time and volunteerism reap quite a number of benefits themselves. And I love what you said earlier, because I haven't often heard this from folk in your field relative to, a financial donor, a time donor, a volunteer donor. They're all donors. And so I'd love for you to share kind of your observations around, and I'll leave this up to you, motivations of people that like to give and or give back. And have you observed, without any judgment here, because this is something else we talked about, because time is a precious commodity. We only have 24 hours in a day. And so I do truly view, as myself, time as significantly valuable as monetary, because in fact, in some ways it's more. And so what have you kind of observed over the years relative to those people that give of their time versus their money, and kind of the juice they get out of those experiences? What have you observed?
Well, there is, I interact with a lot of different people when it comes to different organizations. And it's as with anything in life, it's a bell curve. Yeah. So you have the extremes that have the massive egos, that this is what they want. And that's okay. If you're hearing that and you know how to stroke that, then perfect.
Sure.
All the way to the other end of the spectrum, that people, my opinion, this would be the other end, someone who's just, I don't want my name attached to anything.
Yeah.
Here's everything I have, including the shirt off my back.
Yeah.
And so those are two, and they're great people on both ends of that spectrum, with most people in the middle. I would say that listening component when it comes to fundraising, and I wouldn't even say it's just fundraising, it's just activating people with whatever your message is or whatever you need support on. It'd be the same as you and this experiment that you've created.
Yeah.
How do you listen and get people engaged in what your mission is?
Sure.
Personal mission, professional mission.
Sure.
And when it comes to folks who give time, there is I often feel with many of my colleagues that are in the profession, we disregard that quickly because there's not a strong cash value that's usually attached to that in some way.
Sure.
You can't book it. It's not taxes. I can't spend it.
Yeah.
But it's such a vital part of any organization, especially a nonprofit, when the Los Angeles LGBT Center has in its volunteer resources area, we engage nearly 2,000 volunteers every year. Wow. And that is almost, last year alone, was more than 200,000 hours.
Wow.
So it's massive amounts of support that doesn't always get ticked to say this is $1 billion, campaign.
Yeah.
I know people would, with the time they give, could be so much more than the B that you're using in.
Yeah.
So I think it's really acknowledging, it's engaging them, it's communicating. Why is this of support? It's also, how do you want to be engaged with your time? I'll say all too often, organizations lose me in a volunteer capacity when they say, oh, you're a fundraising communication marketing professional. Let's have you do this. I'm like, that's great. I can do that. And I would love to help, but that's what I do from my 9 to 5.
Yeah.
What else do you need? I have a desire to be engaged from a speaking perspective, or I'd love to be a mentor, and being able to work and communicate to understand how to plug me in best to meet my needs is how you're going to activate more. Because if I feel you've acknowledged me as a volunteer, acknowledged the time I'm putting in, I'm more likely to say, you know what, I have resources now. I have financial resources to give back. Yep. I have friends that I want to connect you with.
Yep.
I believe in your mission and I'm very connected to it. So I'm going to be an ambassador, whether you want me to or not, and talk to many about what we do.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that time piece, almost the friend raising component, is almost more valuable in the beginning than anything else.
I love that, the friend raising component. That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. So it's very important. That's why the teams that I work with, I really emphasize, to your point, that donors are investors, they're volunteers, and they're ambassadors, because we need to keep all three of those pillars understood through our process.
Absolutely. You just made my brain explode, because if you look at the studies around employees' relationships with their employers, and the number one reason why people leave, it's never money.
No.
It's always the appreciation element, right? And so basically what I heard you say is that even for yourself, in your volunteerism and your activism, you want to be listened to.
Yeah.
And you want to be acknowledged, not just, okay, yeah, I can do this 9 to 5, but there's other stuff I can do too. You're a whole being, you're a whole person. Going back to my interview with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, where we talked about happiness and what comprises it and the concept of whole being. Calen is a whole person, and there's many things that make Calen tick. And if to paraphrase, listen to me, being Calen, I'm going to give you, the world and everything else. And so I think that's really, really fascinating and very insightful, frankly.
Thanks.
And so you mentioned the LGBT Center. I'd love to kind of pivot to that a little bit if we can. I know this is a relatively new position for you, yet certainly in your wheelhouse. And so as we were talking before, and as you mentioned, it's the largest center of its kind in the world. And so kind of share with the audience a little bit about what the center does, what your role is, and so forth.
Sure. So the Los Angeles LGBT Center has been around for nearly 53 years. It's one of the oldest and largest in the world relative to focusing on LGBTQ population needs. And there's four major categories that we focus on. It's healthcare, leadership and advocacy, cultural arts, and stability and awareness. So some of our major programs, we just completed a phase 2 build out of one of the campuses for senior housing, for example.
That's awesome.
LGBTQ population of folks that are over the age of 60 tend to have more depression, tend to be alone due to the nature of coming out in their own journey. And what they lived through in our history as a country. And so having a place to get together. We just had our senior prom during the month, and it was a bunch of old people dancing on, and it was beautiful.
Awesome.
You know, things like that are fun. We do cultural arts. We have a whole, like I said, a whole health services where our pharmacy to meet needs free of charge or at a very low cost. For Los Angeles, 50,000 patients or clients a month. It's just a massive organization. And I was, COVID hit, and I had been at USC for 15 years, love that place, still talk to those folks every day, but I was ready for a new challenge and ready for something. We had just completed a big campaign. I had just finished my MBA. I wanted to try something different, take it to the next level. And the Los Angeles LGBT Center has had at its helm for quite some time a great CEO named Lori Jean. And Lori is inspirational. She's powerful. She is really someone that will go down the history books for making the movement what it is today. And I'm very proud of that aspect. She's retiring next July. And she and I had some conversations about this role as Chief Advancement Officer, which is inclusive of volunteerism, so our volunteer resources, our marketing and communication, our development aspect, and also our AIDS life cycle, which is a whole nother conversation. That's a huge bike ride from San Francisco life. Great thing. Anyway, those four pillars exist under advancement. And Lori was talking to me about coming on board and really being part of the leadership team that's taking the baton and running with it after she and a few of our other senior leaders depart. And so I thought, this is a great new challenge. We have 53 years of awesomeness behind us, and what's the next 50 plus years look like for the LGBT Center? And just 2 weeks ago, the new CEO started. There's a year overlap between them. And the senior leadership team, the program leadership team, and the more than 800 staff that make up the center are just super cool, awesome people that have so many different perspectives and stories to tell that I feel like I can spend my entire career there just learning about the great people that are within the center. But to be a part of the leadership team and to set the direction for where we're going was vital to me, and to learn from Lori and team before she departs was something that I thought, this is a unique opportunity I can't pass on.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You know, you're making me think, you're making me see a pattern here. And there's very much a pattern to what makes up Calen Ouellette relative to acknowledging where you are in your own life, acknowledging the privilege that you've had in your life, being thankful for the privilege in your life, and then therefore being able to help others. And whether that is through, I mean, you know, I'm one of your biggest fans, whether that's, you know, I mean, let's call it what it is, whether that's through fundraising for an institution, because where do those dollars go? They go to the students. Whether it's volunteering, where do those dollars goes? They go to help people. Whether it's the Pointe Foundation as the board, you know, that's even, one might argue, even more direct, just because of the tenor of what they do. And so I'd love to ask you if you were sitting here talking not to me, but to somebody who's kind of struggling, and call it what it is, struggling, whether that's coming out or struggling in life. How do you think, what would you say to that person? It's one of my favorite questions to all of my guests.
You know, that it's I'm going to give two things that seem like the complete opposite of themselves,
Okay.
but I've learned this is best for me. The coming out piece, for example, I think the only person you never need to come out to is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to reflect, appreciate, and value the person you are
Mm-hmm.
is very important. You're with yourself your entire life.
Yep.
And as I've said with folks I brought into team, I live with a Calen. I work with a Calen all day long. I don't need another one of me. I want to get people who bring different value to the table.
Yeah.
And so, that is being comfortable with oneself, and how that journey for you is different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some high points and some low points, as we all have.
Sure.
But knowing at the end of the day that it's okay, and it's some days, it's okay to be in that adventure and
Yep.
have some fun. And some days are going to be like, so
Yeah.
very much internal.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it is I had a mentor a long time ago give me a perspective of, just like a business creates a board of directors with different skill sets and different perspectives, find your own board of directors.
I love that.
Find those 3 to 5 people that you want to learn from, that you want to hear perspectives from, that you're open to hearing perspectives from. And whether they know it or not, put them on your own little board of directors. And get together with them individually or on a regular basis. That helps feed who you are and where you want to go, because that's important. And be willing to listen and internalize what they're saying, because oftentimes folks who can see us know more about us than we actually think, and have good perspectives for us. So I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, as Jim Rohn says, I believe it's Jim Rohn, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with.
Yeah.
And so, surrounding yourselves with people that, whether they've traversed the journey you're looking for, or frankly have not and had their own journeys. Of course, all of our journeys are individual. It's a huge benefit to that, to gain of that experience from those individuals.
The only thing I add, just hearing you even say that, and this sounds much easier than it is, but I think it's very helpful, is we're in a time, we all know this, with the connection of the internet, especially this. I think one of the great benefits that's come out of the pandemic is this Zoom connection.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just, I know we're all tired of Zoom, but it's this idea that I can connect with anyone and be anywhere, and it's less intrusive. It's it's easier. When you're that journey, or who you are, is connecting with people, reach out. I really like it when people reach out to me and say, you have no idea who I am, but I have this question for you, or do you have any advice on this, or I'd like to give you a piece of advice. I'm like, this is great. So, reach out and connect with people, because it's easy. And it just takes an email and that type of thing. And you're not going to get a response from everyone, but when I'm hearing you talk, it's that connectivity is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we were talking earlier, it's been a number of people I've reached out for this, and some were very gracious and lovely and responded. And even if I guess what's bringing some thoughts into my head in terms of connections with people, even if the answer is no, take the 2 minutes to answer. Now, I'm not talking about spam stuff and all those emails we get. I don't know about you, but one of my biggest pet peeves on LinkedIn is somebody connects with you and then 2 seconds later you get a private message trying to sell you something. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I agree. For those of you listening, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about, though, is the human connection. It's like, hey, I got your name from so-and-so, would you happen to have 5 minutes, et cetera. I mean, for me, I think this. I mean, well, that I became disabled from dentistry. What you may or may not know is I spend quite a number of hours every year. I get connected all the time to disabled dentists that I lovingly give of my time. And, in the last couple of weeks, it was even one lady who had a brain tumor, another lady that had a stroke, a young man who I'm going to be connected with who went to dental school and then became blind.
Wow.
And can't practice. And so I love that you said that, because you and I, there's a reason why we're friends. We very much think alike. And it's just, give to humanity when and how you can, because the truth of the matter is you never know where that's going to end you up. Right.
Yeah. And I think real quick on that note, when I go back to that bell curve, and there are of donors.
Yeah.
One of the key aspects of listening to any donor is understanding what is it that makes them tick. Everyone has it. It could be that I don't want to be acknowledged. Okay, that's a tick. That's important. To your point right there, and I think it's okay to acknowledge this, I want to help you feel better. That's something that makes people tick. So if you're listening, you really understand how to engage people and be comfortable when you figure out who you are, knowing that Calen, like knowing I'm bringing something to the table to help others. And it's okay to own that.
Yep.
If that makes sense. Is
really
absolutely. Knowing what makes you tick and being honest with yourself about that, instead of trying to say, I do this because I just am, it's the goodness of my heart. Well, that's true. Yeah. But there's also it makes me feel better as a person. And that's absolutely okay to acknowledge.
Absolutely. Now, you may have just answered this. I always like to end with a final question, and you may have just answered this, so forgive me if you have, but
hit me with it. Let's see.
What do you, like, if you were talking to somebody else and they said, as I'm going to, what's the biggest life lesson you've learned in your years on this rock hurling around the sun?
It sounds like such an easy question.
It's not.
It's not.
No.
You know, I'm gonna say, and there's so many layers to this answer.
Yeah.
But it is an adventure and you should be having fun. Okay. And that cliche thing of it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, but it is an adventure. Life is an adventure no matter what you're doing. You should be having fun. So have fun within reason, as long as it's safe. But more importantly, I would say, surround yourself with people that make you feel better. Again, very cliche, but very true.
I love it.
Whether it's friends, whether it's in the profession, you can choose who you work for. I mean, we spend so much time as Americans, we spend so much time in office settings and with people, that choose who you want to work with. You shouldn't be working for someone that makes you feel bad.
No.
And if you really like who you work with, you like who you are as a person, when that alarm, I am definitely one of these people, when the alarm goes off on Monday morning, I'm like, I get to go to work. And that's so stupid and weird, but to me, that's so important.
That's great.
Be like, wow, and there are definitely days where I hit the alarm like 7 times.
Of course.
But you know, I just being able to wake up each day. So I would say enjoy the adventure and surround yourself with people that make you feel good.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And if I may paraphrase and add, find a job that makes you go, yes, I get to go to work when
exactly.
Monday.
Exactly.
So.
I get to open my eyes. My eyes are open today, and it's going to be an awesome adventure.
That's great. What a beautiful way to end. So thank you so very much for your time. I sincerely appreciate it. We're going to put some of the links that Calen had asked us to for the LGBT Center, the Pointe Foundation, and several others in the comments below. And so I just want to thank everybody. And please don't forget to hit subscribe and click notifications so you don't miss out on any future interviews, heart-to-hearts, or book reviews. And remember, life speaks to you. And if you think it doesn't, you're not listening. Take care. Thanks, Calen. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.